Okay, so today's class is about understanding. So far, what we saw were methods for memorization. We saw the memory palace, the major system, a bunch of methods to memorize things. But very often, we don't actually need to just memorize things, just to recall things, but we need to understand them. And that's much deeper than just being able to recall information. So memorization is kind of having a book inside your head. So you can just like close your eyes, enter your memory palace, and retrieve the information as if you were reading a book. But understanding is something different. It's something very different. Instead of just recalling the information, we're actually going to have the capacity to understand things like the causes. We're going to be capable of paraphrasing. We're going to be capable of exemplifying, classifying, doing things like that. So here, I want to remind you guys of the structure that I presented in the first class. So the Bloom's revised taxonomy was that very big table that I showed in the first class, and this was a modification that I made to make it simpler and more understandable for the purposes of this class. So we can have, let's say, three types of cognitive processes, main types of cognitive processes that, at least concerning learning. And each thing that we want to study in school is usually associated to one of these three. So we may be looking for being capable of recalling stuff, like recalling names. Some subjects are going to be a lot about recalling information. Others are going to be understanding. So what causes this? What causes that? How does this model work? What is the difference between this theory and that theory? What are the consequences of such and such event in history and things like that? We also have applying, which is very common in math. So we have like a theorem, and we need to be capable of applying that theorem. We already covered the recalling part, which is basically memory palaces, major system, and also Anki and flashcards in general. Now we're going to move on to the understanding part. Most likely, what I'm thinking of doing is to cover everything related to understanding in this class. So let's move on. This is a very short acronym that I made to make you guys understand what I mean when I speak of understanding. And I call this CEED, with a C instead of an S. So when we are thinking of understanding, we are usually thinking of categories and non-categories. So basically being capable of categorizing things and saying, like, this is under that category, or this is not under that category. That's what I mean by non-categories. We need to be capable of giving examples. Like, we have some piece of content from the material, and if you understand the material, you're supposed to be able to give examples of that. So if there is a label, for instance, you are supposed to be able to give examples and non-examples. Effects and causes, if you're studying a model or a phenomena or events or things like that, if you understand it, people expect you to be capable of telling them the effects and causes of that. Differences and similarities, if you say you understand the material, you are supposed to know the differences of different elements of that. So if you tell me you understand some area of some field of study, and I ask you, what is the difference between this and that? If you tell me that you understand the material, I'm supposed to expect that you understand the differences and similarities between different components that I may pick. So these are the four things that we should keep in mind when we're talking about understanding. When it was about memorization, it was all about recalling. So if you were capable of recalling something given a trigger, given a name or something, you're capable of recalling it, period. But here, it's much more complex, and things are interconnected. And that's the key component of understanding. Understanding, different from memorization. Memorization is everything is isolated. So there are factual information is always isolated. There are bits of information. With understanding, everything is interconnected. So we have categories. The categories have examples. Different things have different effects, different causes. They have differences and similarities. So everything is interconnected. Now moving on to the methods. Before that, any questions about this? Or can I move on? So, okay, so let's move on to the first method, which is the SQ3R. This is a method to read texts. So if you want to study text, if you want to study a book, if you want to study a chapter of a book, you can use this method. It consists of survey, question, read, recite, and review. So that's why 3R. So we have that the survey, you basically are going to look at the main key points. You're going to look for the headings, the subheadings, anything that's highlighted. You're going to look for key terms, anything that seems major in the text. You're supposed to be quick. Don't get bogged down. You're doing a survey. You're not reading it. The second step is to question. So when you're doing the survey, you're going to see a bunch of things that you don't know. And supposedly, you are going to have questions. You are going to have a goal. Maybe the question is going to be, what is the meaning of this term? Or how does this term relate to that term? The most important questions here are going to be questions that show interconnectedness, because we are looking for understanding here. So things like, what causes this? How does this relate to that? What are the consequences of this? What are the examples of this? This type of a question, these types of questions that show interconnectedness, they are usually the most interesting questions to ask. So basically, why and how tend to be the most interesting questions to ask. Then you get those questions, you can write them down for you not to forget them, and you can write them as you do the survey to do it faster. After that, you do the reading, you read the text. And the thing is that when you do the reading, you're reading with the goal of answering the questions you made. So you have a purposeful reading. You're not just reading aimlessly, just page by page and just mindlessly. You're actually looking for the answers of what you wrote in the question step. After that, you go to the recite step, which is basically you put the text aside and you do active recall. So you don't look at the text, you look at the questions that you wrote down and you try to answer them from your head. This particular element of the SQ3R is more of memorization and recalling than understanding, but it's still useful because we're not, when we learn a content, when we learn something, it's not as if it's separate to understand and memorize. We are doing everything at the same time. So this is still useful to have. And at the end, we have a review, so you can create notes to study later, so flashcards or things like that. This basically is the SQ3R. If you need to go faster, if you don't have time, it's a reading that's going to be due soon, you can do some things to make it faster. So you can, for instance, if you don't need to review that, maybe it's going to be very short term, you can skip this step of reviewing. If you don't actually need to memorize things, you don't need to recall things, you just need to have a first experience with the text. You just want to have a first-hand experience. Let's say you just need that reading for before the class, but you don't actually need to know the content deeply before the class. Then maybe you can skip the recite as well, if that's not what you're looking for. Another thing you can do is that you can always prioritize breadth over depth. So the idea is that here we are doing a survey, and a very common mistake is to get bogged down. So you do the survey and you end up, instead of reading just headlines, just main points, key points, you start to read the text and you start to go deeper and deeper. Like, your goal is not to understand things when you're doing the survey. Your goal is really to just to skim the thing. So you're going to have, at first, you're going to have a very shitty understanding of this. And the idea is that you do multiple passes, and as you go, it gets better. You don't need to satisfy the craving for having a complete understanding of everything. You can always do multiple passes. You can do shallow passes and increase the depth as you go. And the advantage of looking for breadth first is because when you get the breadth first, you get the ability to differentiate what's most important for you to focus on. You get a sense of what you should actually focus on, what you should go look for having more depth. While if you go linearly, going as if you delve into everything you look into linearly, if there's something that was not as worth it for you to focus on, you just waste your time, basically. Any questions about this method? Yeah, the anything that's highlighted, any boxes you may have, anything that seems like a key point, basically. Any other questions? Can I move on? Okay. Now I'm gonna cover the Feynman technique. So the SQ3R is a method that we use when we don't know the material yet. We haven't studied yet. The Feynman technique is something that we implement when we have already studied the material and we want to consolidate the material and we want to fill in gaps or we want to review the content. The Feynman technique, you guys probably, who here has heard of the Feynman technique? Raise their hands. Okay. One person? Okay. But who here has heard of the method of teaching yourself or teaching someone the content in the easiest way possible as a way to study? Okay, many more people have heard of it. So this is basically the Feynman technique. And the idea is that we choose a concept to study and we teach that concept. And we can teach it to someone else, to an object, to yourself, but do it out loud. So if you're doing it to yourself, you must do it out loud, or else it's very easy to let mistakes slip. So when you do it in your head, it feels like it's right, but if you said it out loud, it sounds like you can notice that, oh, this is actually not true. So pay attention to that. And your goal is to explain it in simple terms as much as you can and then identify where you struggle. These 3 key points are during the teaching part. Then you go back to the source material and you fill in the knowledge gaps you encountered while we were explaining. So things you had trouble explaining, things you took too long, things that you didn't find the right words, things that you couldn't explain well, you go there, go back to the source material and try to fill in those gaps. Now, we can, at the end, reorganize our explanation based on what the information we learned. So when we fill in those gaps, we are going and go back to the source material. When we reorganize our understanding of the material, we reorganize our explanation and we explain it again in a way that's clearer and more concise. So we try to improve our explanation. And basically we can repeat this process as many times as necessary for us to be capable of getting and feeling that we can explain the content concisely and in simple terms. Any questions about the Feynman technique? Okay, this can be used for pretty much any subject that involves understanding. So things like if you're in the social sciences or humanities, can be very helpful. I would say for math, it's still useful, but we're going to cover other methods that can be very helpful and more intuitive. But definitely, it's also possible to implement the Feynman technique to that. Now I have mind maps. Here is a picture of an example of a mind map. Who here has ever seen a mind map before? Okay. Who here has ever done mind maps or made mind maps? Okay. Okay, nice. So how to build a mind map? Let's start with this point. How do we build one? We first choose a topic and write it. Then we are going to split that topic into, let's say, children nodes, and we're going to choose that intuitively. The first things that come to our head, the first things that come to your mind, when you think of that main topic, you're going to connect them, and they're going to be the children nodes. And you can connect representing their relationship. So let's say if it's a causal relationship, we can make an arrow, we can draw an arrow. You can always highlight, draw, do things like that to emphasize the relationship of the different nodes. We do that until we get a good, we feel that we have covered the main points that we wanted to cover, basically. So you take the children nodes and do the same process. What is this related to? What is this connected to? What are the examples of this? Things like that. And we repeat until we get that good understanding. So some important details. It's always good to have like at most 3 or 4 branches leaving the same node. If you get too many branches leaving the same node, you're probably not prioritizing, you're not classifying enough. If there are like 5 branches leaving, 6 branches leaving, you most likely can find a category that you can put them under. So you could make like, instead of having 5 branches leaving the same node, you can group these 3, group these 2. So now you have another category leaving this, 2 main categories leaving this main node, and this category has 2 children and the other has 3 children. And this is basically what makes the mind maps useful. Is the thinking that you have when you structure it. You may doodle, draw, use abbreviations, anything like that can make it faster, make it more effective. And there should be a lot of thinking, erasing. You should be rewriting that and restructuring that. And it's not supposed to be easy. And it's not necessarily going to be fun, but it's going to be effective. And you may do research as well to help you think of examples and help you think of the structure of the material. So now about some mistakes that I would like to cover with mind maps, because they're so intuitive that sometimes it's hard to think of how they work. And it's hard to, people usually don't expect to make mistakes in it, because it's, you look at it and it looks so cute and you're like, oh, it's just about a bunch of clouds, and just draw clouds and cute clouds in a piece of paper, and that's mind maps. And that's usually the reason why many people actually don't like mind maps, because they think it's just about a bunch of clouds drawn on a paper and it's not useful. But it's not really about the drawing. So first mistake here that I want to cover is that, just like the Feynman method, the best way to do them is not necessarily during the study. So you don't have to do mind maps while you're studying, but after you're studying, it works as a way to consolidate the learning. And it's going to reflect your understanding of the material. And as you reflect on what you just studied, you're going to restructure that understanding in your head. It's not so much about what is on paper, but it's about what is happening in your head when you build it. So that links to the second point. And most of your time should be spent thinking about the structure of the mind map rather than coloring it, doing bubbles, making it cute, choosing different colors and all of that. This doesn't necessarily contribute to the learning. You can have a completely aesthetically ugly mind map that's extremely effective. Okay, you can still have a very ugly mind map that nobody else understands, but that's extremely effective. Because what matters is if the connections, what matters is really the thinking that happened before or during the process of building the mind map. Not before, during. Not drawing too many branches is a good idea. So you please don't draw too many, as I said before. At most 4 is usually a good number. Emphasizing connections between different elements. Sometimes if you have just a bunch of branches connected to other nodes and nodes connected to other nodes and so on, but it's not clear what causes what is an example of what, it is useful to draw things like arrows to highlight, to show that some things are more important than others, so you can change the sizes. If you are going to use colors, if you're going to use colors for just to make it cute, it's not useful. But if you're going to use colors to input meaning, like red is more important, is more relevant, things like that. If you are going to attribute meaning to the colors, then it can be very helpful for learning. Because then there is the thinking. It's not about the color, but the thinking involved into that. Because we need to think what is more important and so on. And there is no need to put everything into the mind map. And some people will have the tendency to put as much as possible, and they will try to put everything they can into the mind map. And that's not necessarily the most effective way of doing it, because not everything that you're studying will be important. Most likely it won't, and some things will be more relevant than others. Very often, having a good understanding of priority and understanding of the hierarchy of importance of the content that you're studying is also relevant. Any questions about that? Any questions? Or is it good? Okay, I'll move on then. When to use each method. If you want to read the text, you can use the SQ3R. If you want to do it faster, you can skip some steps. You can always skip some steps that are not necessarily important for you at that moment. I do think that the most important ones would be to survey and to make a purposeful reading. So you do a survey and you have questions that will guide you during the reading. So you're not going to waste your time reading every single piece of information. Texts are not 100% important. Most likely there will be, obviously there will be parts that are more important than others. And you don't need to know absolutely every single comma in the text. So I think that's the most useful part of SQ3R that makes it worth it. The idea that you should survey, and when you read deeply, you should actually do that intentionally. And if you want to consolidate your learning after you had already studied, after you already read the content, fill in gaps or review your understanding, you can use the Feynman method or mind maps. These two methods, they can be better to review understanding than flashcards, because flashcards are awesome, Anki is awesome, but it's about factual information. So isolated pieces of information. You're just recalling information. You have one side of the deck of the flashcard, and you recall the information on the back. This is pure memorization. And understanding involves not isolated bits of information, but rather an interconnected model. So we understand examples, we understand causes and effects, we understand how one is classified into something else, we understand differences and similarities between different things. And if you're going to put all of that into flashcards, you're going to have a ton of flashcards. While if you just apply the Feynman method, you're going to have it's going to be much shorter, and you're going to be able to explain a lot of material and review a lot of the understanding you have on the content. Besides that, even if you could put everything into flashcards, besides the fact that it would be very long and very large, there is also the problem that you would be missing the point, because understanding is not really about just recalling a bunch of memorized information, but rather having that knowledge integrated with each other, not just a bunch of if I see this thing, I recall that thing, which is basically what we have in memorization. You have this question, you recall that thing, you recall that name. It's not about knowing the meaning of each terminology, but actually having an integrated knowledge. But you should still use Anki together with understanding. That should be clear. So you can use Anki for things like terminology, isolated bits of information, and those bits of information are the building blocks that are used for understanding. So the connections that are made, they can be reviewed with Feynman method and mind maps more effectively. And the memorization side, they can be reviewed with Anki. Now, if you want to differentiate memorization from understanding, if you're not sure if you actually understand, or if you actually understand, or if you just memorize the material, you can use CEED. Basically, just this acronym for you to be able to understand what it actually means to understand, basically. So, any questions? Any questions so far? Okay, great. So, the final is a memory competition, and it's due next week. And I know we just had the second midterm, and I didn't want to put this final together with the other finals, so I'm putting this next week because nobody wants to take an EXCO final the same week as all finals. That would be awful. And I don't want to to look at your solutions either. So here we have the memory competition. We have this website. You select national standard, and you compete in these three modalities. It's offline, so you're just gonna compete these three modalities, and you can compete as many times as you want. You just need to screenshot your best score in each discipline and send it to me on email. You should have your memory palaces ready before memorization. And if you're auditing, you can still participate, and it's fine. Here I'm gonna exemplify to you guys. So here I'm gonna click on the link. It's gonna open the okay. Okay, for some reason it's not working. Why it's not working? Okay. Why? Honestly, why is this not working? Extend. I don't want to extend. Okay. Keep changes. Okay. Okay, here. So we have here national standard 5-minute numbers. This is one of the disciplines we're going to compete. So you should choose national here. There are multiple disciplines. This website is actually for a memory competition, an actual memory competition. And memory athletes use this to practice. So we're gonna do the 5-minute numbers, 5-minute words, and 5-minute names and faces. And the idea is that it's completion based, obviously. I just want you guys to apply the things we saw in class, apply the memory palace, and practice a little and get a sense of how this can be done under some time pressure. So here we have 5-minute numbers. I'm going to click and go just to exemplify. So here are some explanations. You can do that on your own at home for you to get a sense. You can do multiple times so you can get a sense of how it works. I'm going to click here, start. It's going to count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, now it's showing. So this is a ton of digits. Obviously, don't worry, you're not supposed to memorize all of them in the 5 minutes, but you're supposed to memorize as many as you can. So you're gonna go, let's say you want to memorize 3 by 3, then you go 3 by 3, you can move with the arrows of the keyboard. Then we go, and after 5 minutes, time is going to be up, and it's gonna cancel. I'm gonna skip this. Okay, I want to skip, finish the memorization. Okay, then the recall is going to start. And now you type the digits you can remember. So let's say it was 3, 9, 2, 0, 1. I can't remember this one. So let me skip this one. Let me click on the next one. So 1, 0, it was 2. And then you keep going. Oh, I can't remember anymore. So I finish. Are you sure? Okay. Oh, I made all mistakes. So that's my score. So what you do, you screenshot this and send to me on email. And do that for all the 3 disciplines. And then I'm gonna make a ranking with you guys. So it's gonna be an actual competition. So just screenshot this page, basically, for the 3 disciplines. And we're gonna have like the first one for each discipline. Here. Also, if you tell me a very large number, I can tell. So there is like, it's not, if you try to cheat, it's not gonna work because I know what is a decent number to memorize under that time. And if you actually did that, I would actually just ask you to do it in person because I would be curious to see it. So there's no point in cheating this one because I will want to see if you have a very large number. Here, 5-minute names and faces is the same thing. You go here, you start. It's going to 3, 2, 1. So here we have a bunch of, oh, it's in Arabic. Oh no, I don't read Arabic. Okay, let me leave this page. Okay, names and faces, go. Character set, Latin. So here are the settings, and here we can choose like character set. So in my case, it was in Arabic because it was selected in Arabic. So you change here. So if you have some problem like that, you just change the settings here. Let me go back as well. And the other one is words. So here, language is English. Here, 4, 3, 2, 1. So here we have a bunch of words, and you can Just go, linking them in your memory palace. And it works the same way. I'm going to show something. From the 5-minute numbers, here we can choose groupings for highlight. So we can choose like to group by 2 instead of 3. So this is the preview you have. For words, you're going to have the same. You can choose the grouping. You can choose to group by 2 instead of 3. You can change all of those. Test the settings if you don't feel comfortable with the way the settings are. When you're practicing, send me your best score in each of these 3 disciplines, in all of them. Okay, don't choose one, because I'm going to make the ranking for all of them. That's all. Any questions? It's due next Wednesday. Okay. Any questions? It's in the last slide. Okay. In the last slide, I'm gonna put it up in the drive folder, which I sent in the emails. It's also available in the description of the video recordings. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Yeah, I guess that's all. Thank you very much, guys. It was supposed to be a short class. If you have any questions later on, you can let me know. That's it. Thank you, guys. Have a good night.